Now is pan Mr. Mohammad Hazrati speaking from Singapore. Mr. Hazrati, are you online?
Yes, I'm online.
Okay. We can
Could you
see
hear me? Could you see me
yes,
properly?
yes.
Thank you.
So,
And should I share the slides or no?
no, we don't see your slides, your presentation.
Okay, don't worry.
You have 15 minutes. Please start.
Sure, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Mohammad Hazrati, a senior research fellow at the Center for International Law at the National University of Singapore. First of all, I want to express my sincere apologies for not being able to come to Poland. Unfortunately, I became quite sick just before flight and had to cancel it. It's a real shame to miss this great opportunity to take part in person in such a wonderful conference. I want to thank the organizing team for providing me with this opportunity to present my work online. Let me save the time and start my presentation, which is about governing critical minerals for a just and sustainable energy transition in ASEAN, insights from the EU. Actually, my research asks how we can develop a just and inclusive approach to governing critical energy transition minerals as a necessary step toward achieving a just and inclusive energy transition. To explore this question, I use a doctrinal case study and comparative methods, focusing mainly on the regional and international levels rather than national one. So as we all know, the world is facing a growing climate emergency. To address it, a major shift from fossil fuels to renewable energy system is inevitable. Global renewable capacity is projected to triple by 2013 and to increase eightfold by 2050 compared to 2022 level. So clean energy technologies are at the heart of this transition, but they're also highly mineral intensive. They depend heavily on what we call critical energy transition minerals. So achieving a net zero emissions will require a massive increase in these minerals, roughly a six-fold rise in minerals inputs by 2014. There is no, when it comes to definition of these critical minerals, we should say that there is no universal definitions. There are some criteria some people say about it, like these minerals are essential for modern technologies, for economies, for national securities, or their supply chains are vulnerable to disruptions, but there is no any consensus about the definition of these critical minerals. One of the main concerns linked to critical energy transition mineral is market concentration. So their refining and processing are heavily concentrated among a few countries, and so it increases the risk of the supply disruptions. There are many reports, many studies working on this vulnerability, but we know that the concern is not only, the market concentration. It goes beyond that, and it includes environmental and human rights issue as well. And also right to clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. From a very, very legal perspective, both the Paris Agreement and very recent ICJ advisory opinion on climate change emphasizes that a state must respect and promote human rights when addressing climate change. So when it comes to Southeast Asia, some countries are playing very important role in critical mineral supply chain, like Indonesia and the Philippines. Both are key producer for nickel. Vietnam and Myanmar are very important player for rare earth elements, and Malaysia is a very important player in processing and refining of the rare earth elements. However, as I said, there are some very important players, but there are still some important governance issue here. For instance, just to give you one example, we can look at a very recent report by UNICRI, which highlighted the crime associated with critical minerals in Southeast Asia and was issued this year, some month ago. So when we are thinking about human rights-based approach and then just an inclusive, approach, we need to think about an international framework. And fortunately, there is an emerging international human rights-based framework, which is complemented by two very recent and important international advisory opinion from the ICJ and the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. So when we think and we speak about international perspective, international legal perspective, some people, the first thing that comes up to the mind, some people say that permanent sovereignty of natural resource is the main and most important relevant customary international law. It's right, but we know that it's not the only thing that exists in international law. And states have many other, international obligations that should be, that they must respect, including environmental and human rights obligation. The current international frameworks, includes but not limited to UN guiding principles on business and human rights, as well as the UN Secretary General's CETM panel, which issued its 2024 report and 2025 guidance for action. All of these frameworks emphasizes that human rights must be at the core of the entire mineral value chain. But in terms of the EU, we know EU has provided one of the most comprehensive legal frameworks for governing these minerals. It has developed key legal and policy tools, including the Critical Raw Material Act, the EU Principle for Sustainable Raw Material 2021, the Battery Regulation, and Battery Directives, and the Conflict Mineral Regulation. But here I'm just focusing on Critical Raw Material Act as a key instrument for securing a resilient and sustainable supply of critical materials. So this act promotes efficiency and circularity across the entire value chain of the critical materials. And it's complemented by the other regulation that I already mentioned. And it lists 34 critical raw materials. Out of them, 17 are considered strategic. It also sets clear benchmarks for 2030. For instance, it says that 10% of the EU's annual consumption should come from extraction within the EU, or it says that no more than 65% from a single third country for any strategic raw material. So the other very important thing which exists in this act is strategic projects. This act introduces strategic projects by making financing and administration easier and by streamlining permitting, but at the same time taking into account environmental standards. So private companies can apply for a strategic project status, which elevates a project to a public interest status and give it access to associate benefits. The Commission can revoke a strategic project status if the criteria are no longer met. So it means that those associated benefits will disappear if the company is not anymore meeting those criteria. So a strategic project can even be developed outside the EU through mainly strategic partnership. By 2025, the Commission had officially recognized 47 strategic projects within the EU and 13 outside. So to be designated as a strategic project under the Critical Mineral Raw Material Act, a project must be technically feasible, contribute meaningfully to the EU security of raw material supply, must be implemented in a sustainable manner, must ensure transparency, must provide benefits that cross borders within the EU, or have mutually beneficial impact for third countries. So sustainability is a central part for being considered as a, strategic project. And project must monitor, prevent, and minimize environmental impacts, address social risks by respecting human rights, indigenous rights, labor rights, and meaningfully with, engagement with local communities, and they should maintain transparent business practices, and so on and so forth. And when it comes to indigenous rights, specifically, project promoter must submit a dedicated plan if the project may affect indigenous community. And in terms of the evaluation, the European Commission evaluates compliance by checking adherence to EU laws and international laws through acceptance of certified voluntary industry schemes or by itself. So there are two ways that Commission can just assess the compliance. Although there are some criticism against this third-party certification, but I believe that this act still is a model, can be a model for many other regimes and countries, because it's been successful in striking a balance between sustainability and security at the same time. But when it comes to ASEAN, there is at the moment there is no ASEAN-wide adopted definition about critical materials. There is no list about these materials. There is no even definition about these critical raw materials. I mean, in the ASEAN levels, of course, in terms of when it goes to the countries by countries, there are definitions and lists, but in ASEAN level, there is no. There are some very important general legal instruments in ASEAN, like ASEAN Charter of 2007, which is the only binding instrument in ASEAN, and which promotes human rights, protecting human rights and fundamental freedoms. And there are some other general, legal instrument in ASEAN, which provide a legal, framework for governing critical minerals. But there are also some specialized instruments as well. For instance, there is one ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation, which the new one, which covers 2026 to 2013, just issued last month in October. And when we go through this document, which is relevant to it's a blueprint for the whole ASEAN regime. So it says about the aims, objectives of relevant to energy industry of the whole regime. But when we go through this document, we cannot find any even a single word about critical minerals. And there is another blueprint document for minerals, which is called ASEAN Minerals Cooperation Action Plans. The same, that the new one covers from 2026 to 2013. And in this plan of action, there is no specific, concern or issues about justice, human rights, and other sustainability issues or indigenous rights. As my final point, I want to highlight some of the key challenges in governing critical energy transition minerals in ASEAN, and then suggest areas to prioritize. I know that there has been some progress in this regime, and from 2019 to so far, there have been more attention to sustainability issues when it comes to critical minerals, but still it's too little. And the most important thing is when although there are some reference to critical minerals or to sustainability, but it's so fragmented. For instance, when it goes to energy documents or energy cooperation documents, it doesn't speak about critical minerals. When it comes to mining blueprints, it doesn't speak about justice or human rights or sustainability. And there is no comprehensive, and coherent document which covers critical minerals as a step, necessary step for just transition, as an step for, energy life cycle. So another thing is there is no list of priorities or something that exists in EU as a strategic project. There is no such a thing in ASEAN. So ASEAN doesn't know that which project should be prioritized and how they want to accelerate the process and how they want to be sure that they are safeguarding environmental and social risks at the same time. So it's suggested that ASEAN ministers can think about having such, categories under which they can prioritize some projects, but still have a very strict environmental and social, criteria, but at the same time, mainstreaming, accelerating administrative and financial issues for those
Dr. Hazrati,
projects.
please conclude your presentation. Time is up.
Yeah. Okay. The last thing I want to mention, just as the very final point, is that the compliance, as we have in the EU, we need, in ASEAN, we need a very independent organization that assess, evaluate the compliance of, private companies by those criteria that will be submitted by the document I already mentioned. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention, and I would be happy to answer your question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hazrati. The next speaker is Dr. Alicia Phillips from France. Please, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Please allow me to share my screen. Just give me a moment. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see.
Great. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to the organizers for once again organizing a brilliant conference. It is a pleasure to be presenting, though not in person today. I also had plans to attend in person, but it became impossible at the very, very last moment. My name is Alicia Phillips, and today I will be presenting on navigating a new justice framework for cities research for the benefit of current and future generations. So just some quick facts about me. I am originally from the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, the West Indies, where I qualified as a lawyer. I am currently a Ph.D. researcher at the University of Pau and Pays-le-Dor and CNRS in France. I am one of the associate editors for the journal Renewable and Sustainable Energy Reviews and a member of the climate research platform Just Transition Working Group at the University of Oxford. I am also a visiting lecturer at the Karoli Gaspar Reformed University in Hungary, and I annually co-organize a series of international early career conferences geared towards networking and improving interdisciplinary research amongst the early career community. And these are some of the institutions and organizations I've worked with to date. So just quickly, in terms of an outline of the presentation, I'm going to situate the research and say why it's going to be focused on cities. I'll provide the aims of the research, give a little background into the urban climate nexus, then introduce justice into the discussion, where justice is a generational journey, then quickly point out some of the impacts on current and future generations in terms of climate change, then present systems-based compendium, and then conclude and give you future pathways. So in terms of situating the research and why, this piece of research builds on some research I conducted alongside Professor Heffron in 2024, and it's still very relevant today. And if you are interested in reading that piece of research that's still quite relevant today, that is a snapshot of the article on the screen. So the focus on cities is still relevant, as cities are still high contributors for global GHG emissions, contributing 67 to 72%, and are also victims of climate change. So it's very important for cities today to manage these risks and future-proof themselves, especially in light of Sustainable Development Goal 11, which talks about sustainable cities and communities. So it's relevant for cities to lead the global response. In terms of the aims of the research, for me, there are three: to explore the relationship between cities and climate change. So the intention is to ideally look at 16 cities, and it's still quite early, so that may change. New York, Montreal, London, Sao Paulo, Bogota, Lagos, Johannesburg, Singapore, Manila, Mumbai, Valencia, Bordeaux, Melbourne, Shanghai, Jakarta, and Abu Dhabi. And we'll be using a mixed method of research style. So it's going to be a mix of qualitative and quantitative research. And then the second aim would be to illustrate how urban research and policies are evolving to address present and future challenges and consequences. And then the last aim would be to provide a systems-based compendium which cities can implement or follow to safeguard their societies and build resilience now and into the future. So when we talk about the urban climate nexus, we're looking at two things. We're looking at the fact that cities are drivers of climate change, and then they're also victims of climate change. When we speak about cities being the drivers of climate change, we're going back to what I mentioned before. Urban areas are responsible for generating 67 to 72% of global GHG emissions, and its main contributors are energy consumption from buildings and transportation, so it's very energy intensive. The fact that industrial processes are located in concentrated metropolitan zones. And then the last one is linked to urban expansion. So it talks about the fact that land use changes are changing in terms of building cities and expanding them. When we're looking at cities as victims of climate change, it's based on the risks that they face based on climate change. So it's linked to the sea level rise that's threatening coastal megacities like Jakarta and New York, for instance. The fact that water scarcity and flooding, especially in rapidly growing cities with inadequate drainage, has become a problem, which also leads us to public health impacts in terms of vector-borne diseases or even air pollution from all of the transport. So ideally, these challenges disproportionately affect marginalized populations and highlights the deep inequalities in climate vulnerabilities. When we introduce justice into the discussion, justice is a generational journey, and through all of the justice work we do as researchers, we recognize our interconnections with the past, the present, and the future. So we're looking at the fact that justice is intra-generational, so it's for present generations, and intergenerational, so it's for past and future generations. And when we're looking at justice in terms of intergeneration and intragenerational, it refers to the ethical obligation that one generation has towards both the preceding and the succeeding generations, particularly as it relates to environment and societal welfare. So just to quickly touch on some of the impacts before I present the compendium. Some of the impacts we know about are rising temperatures currently, so cities are hotter than surrounding rural areas due to concrete, asphalt, and in some cases limited greenery. Heat waves cause higher rates of heat-related illness and death. And as you can see, the newspaper article from September 2025 on the screen states that 2 in 3 heat deaths are happening in Europe, and it's because it's too hot. In terms of future impacts, we see cooling costs could rise and increase inequality as poorer residents struggle to afford air conditioning. So public health systems will face greater stress from heat-related illnesses. And we see one example there, India, some of the women are actually painting the roofs of their home white so that it becomes cooler. A second impact will be flooding and sea level rise, and currently coastal cities have already faced frequent flooding during high tides and storms, and heavy rainfall overwhelms drainage systems. Future impacts, rising sea levels could permanently inundate parts of low-lying cities like Miami, Jakarta, for instance. And when we talk about Jakarta, we see that Jakarta, Indonesians are actually relocating Jakarta, their capital city, and then moving the capital to Nusantara. And this is because of rising sea levels. But it's with the aim to build a smart and sustainable forest city with the help of China. Then if we talk about the fact that insurance costs will increase or become unavailable in some high-risk zones, we see some important developments in Italy, where Italy now has a new mandatory natural catastrophe insurance, and that came about in January 2025. Then extreme weather and infrastructure stress. So currently, stronger storms and droughts damage infrastructure, disrupt transport and power supplies. Future impacts would be more frequent and extreme weather, and it requires cities to rebuild or redesign resilient infrastructure. And when we're talking about resilient infrastructure, we can look at Singapore, where sea level rise is something that is threatening them because they're low-lying, but they are enhancing flood resistance by, firstly, as you can see on the screen, source pathway receptor approach, and that deals with their drainage system. And then in terms of staying cool during heat waves, we look at how they are constructing their buildings. Then finally, in terms of the economy and livelihood, the current impacts, climate disasters disrupt economies, tourism and employment. And we see an example of change in labor markets and disruption of economy in Bordeaux, for instance, where the biggest urban area in the region, Nouvelle-Aquitaine, and it's a wine industry, and it plays a pivotal role in the global wine economy. It brings 7.6 billion euros in exports and employs over 500,000 people. And Bordeaux is actually suffering from hailstorms, heat waves, and drought, and it's impacting grape varieties. So they're looking into soil management, vineyard layouts, and even crop insurance. In terms of presenting the systems-based compendium, and I'm almost finished, this compendium is based on a UN Habitat reading, and you can see the proposal is that cities can adopt this and track and safeguard their societies and build resilience now and into the future, so they can ensure adaptation measures are happening, focus on blue-green infrastructure, look at climate risk mapping, circular economy strategies, nature-based climate solutions, look at their transport, provide technological solutions, and also probably even X-Minute City vision, which talks about it's an urban planning concept where daily life is reachable with a shorter set time by walking or cycling. So it's all about sustainability in mind. But here in particular, we want to focus on justice. And we're saying that once justice is achieved, when we look at justice, we're thinking about energy justice. It's the fact that it would bring cities closer to building resilience. And a sustainable city must be just. So climate policies that neglect equity can't reinforce societal divides, and equity is key to shared urban resilience. So just to conclude, while the compendium from A to Z is very, very large, it reminds us that resilience is complex, and cities can thrive, and resilience is something we can all take part in. But placing justice at the center of developmental strategies at each of the levels I mentioned will only bring strong and fair, adaptable cities. So today, while we know that cities are adopting green infrastructure, implementing climate resilient design, renewable energy, efficient transport systems, equitable adaptation policies to protect vulnerable populations, more is needed. And that is where the compendium comes into play. Of course, if anyone is interested in participating in this piece of research, it's quite new, so please get in touch. And if you're interested in reading more about new engagement strategies for energy justice, please contact me and I'll share this text with you. And just to say that coming soon in December 2025, early career researchers also have a second edited collection coming about, and it's based on global perspectives on the circular economy in the just transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. Thank you for your time discipline. Now it's time for Dr. Kovács from Hungary, from neighboring country, and also Catholic University.
Well, thank you very much. It's my great pleasure to speak here today, and I am honored by the invitation of Dr. Marcin Graszewski to speak at this really international and high level for the conference. It's really amazing the variety of topics and disciplines which are represented, and it's my great pleasure to be here to learn from the other speakers. My topic also aims to add to the interdisciplinary and cross-cutting character of this conference. My aim is to bring in a constitutional perspective through the topic energy law. I have for today a simple but ambitious claim. Energy law in Europe is no longer the major branch of economic regulation. It has become a constitution field.
The green transition is better. The green transition and the digital transition, as we know, are not just industrial strategies. They are projects that test the constitutional architecture of the European Union. Energy governance is now a matter of constitutional balance between the effective enforcement of EU norms and the preservation of national constitutional identity. The enforcement of energy law itself, who enforces, how and under what principles, has become the constitutional battlefield and will become even more. And this is where judicial dialogue plays its most vital role as the structural mechanism through which mutual trust between national courts and the Court of Justice of the European Union is either maintained or eroded. So the concept of this judicial dialogue is embedded in the very DNA, so to say, of the Union. It is in Article 267 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, the preliminary ruling procedure, the single most important competence of the Court of Justice of the European Union, functions as a procedural backbone of the European legal order. Through this preliminary ruling procedure, national judges are transformed into decentralized EU judges. They become constitutional interlocutors in a system built on cooperation rather than hierarchy. The Court of Justice ensures coherence and uniformity, and the dialogue with the national courts is mutual, dynamic, dialectical, and sometimes, as we saw it, is rich with conflicts. We have seen, just to mention a few cases, there are very positive examples like the Italian Taricco case, or from the energy field, the Hinkley Point C case, where national courts tested the boundaries of EU competencies. And then, of course, there are less positive examples of this judicial dialogue. We could, for instance, mention the PSPP decision of the German Constitutional Court, for example. Energy, perhaps more than any other sector, embodies this constitutional dialectic. In recent years, energy crisis, decarbonization mandates, digitalization have converged, make energy law a laboratory for constitutional stress testing. Just to mention a case where Poland was also involved, the C-848/19 case before the CGU. The court interpreted cross-border renewable subsidies, balancing market integration with national energy security. These decisions reflect the same structural tension, how to reconcile the Union's constitutional commitment to integration with the member states' insistence on control over their own energy choices, often constitutionally protected as matters of sovereignty or national security. To structure to give a typology of this judicial dialogue, we can name three types of dialogues. The first one is the classical interpretative dialogue between the CGU and the national courts. The second one, the systemic dialogue, is related to the competence limits of the European Union and the negotiation, so to say, of those competencies between the CGU and national courts. And the last one is the normative dialogue, where the debate is about shared values, democracy, rule of law, sustainability. And energy law engages all three of these fields. And at the heart of these dialogues lies a paradox. The Union depends on constitutional diversity, yet must preserve the uniformity of its legal order. The concept of constitutional identity, first invoked in the German Lisbon decision, later echoed by the French Conseil constitutionnel and other constitutional courts as well. The Court of Justice, there's a challenge for the Court of Justice, is to interpret EU energy law in a manner consistent with rule of law while respecting constitutional pluralism. And national courts, in turn, must exercise their constitutional guardianship in a way that preserves the unity of the European legal space. So we may call this as an integration paradox. The more the EU integrates to meet transnational challenges, energy security, climate neutrality, digital infrastructure, the greater the pressure on national constitutional boundaries. Cases, for instance, such as Nord Stream 2, expose this paradox very clearly. The energy infrastructure regulation became a geopolitical and a constitutional issue. Who decides the conditions of energy independence? The Union or the member states? Each of these disputes, while technical in appearance, questions the very grammar of EU constitutionalism. Can integration proceed through technocratic agencies, or must it remain politically accountable through member states' constitutional structures? The answer lies, I believe, in the evolution from hierarchical to cooperative constitutionalism. A vision where courts act not as competitors for final authority, but as partners in a shared project of constitutional governance. The global energy case, which came from Hungary, offers a telling example. The Court of Justice reaffirmed that effective judicial protection under Article 47 of the Charter applies even in specialized energy regulation. The decision strengthens not only rights, but also trust. Trust that national judges remain faithful interpreters of both EU law and domestic constitutional principles. In the spirit, cooperation between the Court of Justice of the European Union and constitutional courts must evolve beyond occasional conflict into structured constitutional dialogue. Only then can we reconcile energy integration with constitutional democracy. And here I would also mention the theory of Joseph Weiler, who emphasized the importance of constitutional dialogue and mutual constitutional tolerance as the only way of a peaceful development of and uniform interpretation of union law. So let me conclude with three reflections. First, energy law has become constitutional law by every means. Its enforcement mechanism, its institutional actors, and its rights implications all mirror the structural logic of the EU constitutional order. Second, judicial dialogue is not an accessory, but the lifeblood of this order. Without it, integration would harden into technocracy and sovereignty would dissolve into fragmentation. And third, the energy transition will test Europe's constitutional resilience, whether through AI-driven smart grids, decarbonization targets, or transnational energy solidarity. The Union will need not only technical capacity, but constitutional imagination. I believe that our task is to ensure that the Green Deal and the Digital Deal unfold within the rule of law deal, an implicit compact of trust between European and national constitutionalism. And the future of energy governance will not be decided solely in Luxembourg or Brussels, that's for sure. It will be shaped in courts and parliaments across Europe in a continuing conversation that defines who we are as a constitutional community. And as a personal remark, I believe that that we are just at the beginning of potential conflicts between national constitutional orders and the legal order of the European Union in the field of energy, which will be related to national sovereignty, national constitutional identity issues. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Kovács, for your interesting presentation. Thank you very much. The next one is Professor Rute Saraiva from Portugal. Sorry if I pronounce his name not accurately.
Hello, are you listening to me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, yes.
Okay. I'm trying to share my presentation to make it easier, but I will talk without the presentation and you'll follow. It's easier.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, so thank you very much, especially to the organizing committee for the invitation and especially for allowing me to do this online, because it was impossible for me to be in Poland today because tomorrow I have to be in the US. So it would be quite an energy waste in terms of going everywhere. It would be emissions, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm in Lisbon and I thank you for the possibility to do this online. So I'm a law professor at the University of Lisbon, and what I intend to talk about is about the use of nudges or informed regulation that have regressive risks, and for that they cause risks for this just transition. So my presentation is called Behavioral Tools, Just Transition and the Ethics of Energy Regulation, Navigating Regressive Risks in Decarbonization Policies. And why does this matter? And why do I look at this from a behavioral economics perspective? First of all, we're talking about energy transition, and this is not only a technological problem, but it's also a social and an ethical problem. And actually, behavioral instruments are being increasingly used to steer energy choices. And normally they're used because they're cheap, and normally also because they're quite effective and cost effective. So the problem is that efficiency may unintentionally deepen inequality. So instead of increasing equality, the use of these tools may increase inequality. And since governments are using behavioral science to influence choices in energy markets, we must be sure that the use of these tools are not causing distributional effects that may be regressive. So if I want to make justice, and if I want to have ethics and this transition in terms of energy policy, I have to look at these topics. So the central problem is that behavioral tools are shaping decarbonization. But the question is, are they compatible with a just transition? There's tensions between effectiveness and fairness, autonomy and paternalism, efficiency and legitimacy. And what this presentation explores is how behavioral energy regulation can avoid regressive risks and respect both autonomy, transparency, legitimacy, and equity. And the theoretical foundations for this presentation rely on behavioral economics. So the idea of a bounded rationality, a bounded motivation, and bounded self-interest. Also regulatory theory, which puts in perspective the questions surrounding legitimacy and accountability. Also ethics and justice, especially in the perspective of fairness and protection of vulnerable groups. So these three perspectives together allow us to critically assess not only how behavioral tools work, but whether they are normatively acceptable in energy governance. And behavioral informed instruments, normally the most known ones are nudges, like green defaults, like feedback, like the use of social norms, of commitment devices. We can also use behavioral insights to redesign taxes, for instance, carbon taxes with framing effects. So these mechanisms, what they want to do is to shift behavior subtly, but sometimes they're, not sometimes, always, their distributive consequences are rarely analyzed. So sometimes these smart policies become regressive. And we will have regressive nudging with higher costs for low-income users, with cognitive asymmetry where wealthier users navigate better, which causes moral hazard, which means that with these behavioral tools, we are shifting responsibility from the government to individuals, and efficiency gains may come with a cost of justice, especially when behavioral asymmetries mirror socioeconomic inequalities. And the main problem is to know if there are some groups that are more susceptible to nudges, if nudges affect vulnerable populations more, and if there are some cognitive or social profiles that are more nudgeable. And for this, we need to check and cross-check nudgeability and distributional effects, not overall welfare effects, distributional effects. The fact is we have little data on this. So it's an area where research should deepen the mining of data. So despite the belief that nudges are costless, they actually may entail significant costs. And who is more likely to be nudged and behaviorally more vulnerable? There are already some studies that show that the level of education or literacy, legal, digital, financial, can influence people. The cognitive and emotional pressure, like economic stress, cognitive overload, can also have an impact. The perceived structure, especially greater trust or dependence on state institutions and the perception of fairness, can also help people being more vulnerable to behavioral tools. And also there's some data about sociodemographic differences like age, where youth and elderly normally are more susceptible to nudges, gender, generally women, also the income level, and also minorities. So there's an amount of data that shows that in some situations, some people are more vulnerable or more susceptible to nudges than others. And this is what I wanted to do, is to link this with just transition. And the just transition movement is, as an origin, the labor movement, but now it relies on climate policy. And the principle behind it is no one should be left behind in this low carbon shift. So there's dimensions of distributive, procedural, and recognition justice. And the idea of this just transition actually reframes decarbonization as a moral and institutional project. So it demands that efficiency and fairness should be co-designed and not traded off. And as examples for nudges that actually could be regressive and have distributional effects, there are 3 interesting studies, one by Ebeling and Berger about the opt-out for renewable energy in Germany, where when we have opt-out decisions, the green default rule is chosen by 90% of consumers, while when we have opt-in systems, 25% of people will choose the green opt-out. Also, in Switzerland, there's a study by Gessler and others where the authors find that the default is successful at curbing greenhouse gas emission, but it leads poorer households to pay more for their electricity consumption than they want to, while leaving a significant willingness to pay for green electricity by richer households untapped. Also, there's a very interesting case by Klant et al. That analyzed Germany's refrigerator replacement program and taking nudges that were already tested with success in some categories of people. What they realized was when they apply this to lower income families, the nudges backfired. So there was a transportability problem in taking nudges that were effective in a context and passed it to another context and to vulnerable groups. So what this means is that behavioral policies need equity audits. Nudges should be context sensitive and should attend to heterogeneity. Also, justice frameworks should guide ethical calibration, and instead of rejecting these behavioral tools because they can be regressive, we should design them ethically with justice concerns inbound. So this is what we should do, is a need for ethical sensitivity and differentiated regulation by looking at aspects such as assessment of distributive impact of nudges prior and during the implementation of nudges, transparency in the design and application of nudges, right to contest and genuine opt-out for energy consumers, the design of socially sensitive nudges, and have a for good policy all over the energy policy. This means that we should attend to principles such as transparency. So we should disclose the mechanisms and intent behind nudges, use proportionality, legitimacy, and accountability. And what we aim to is to ensure that public accepts these tools and that these tools are oversighted. Also, these principles, transparency, proportionality, legitimacy, and accountability, should ensure that behavioral regulation operates within democratic, transparent, and fair boundaries. So we should go from smart to just regulation and to a constitutional approach of these nudges regulation. So we should add distributive metrics to policy evaluation, combine behavioral insights with social protection, redefine efficiency as inclusive efficiency, promote procedural rights and co-design with citizens, and policymakers should balance behavioral innovation with ethical reflections. And justice must be embedded and not just added in the way we build energy regulation and these behavioral tools. So this constitutional approach means that we should have active transparency, an open data state. We should look at co-design and active listening, procedural rights, and transformative empowerment, taking into account democratic innovations, effective accountability, and of course, distributional, procedural, and transformative justice. So the key takeaways are that behavioral tools are powerful, but they are not neutral. Without safeguards, green policies can be regressive and create legal and ethical concerns. So a just transition aligns behavioral design with fairness, and a just transition is both a technical and a moral challenge, one that requires interdisciplinary collaboration between law, economics, and ethics. So in conclusion, a legitimate environmental nudging policy must adhere to 6 core pillars: real and protected decisional autonomy, active transparency, proportionality in relation to the intended goals, active distributional sensitivity, democratic accountability and institutional review, no one-size-fits-all solution. So these requirements do not say that we cannot use nudging, but rather that we should be critical in the use of nudges and to integrate them within the rule of law framework. So to conclude, a just transition is not only about where we are going, but how we get there and who bears the cost of the journey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Saraiva. Now, Mr. Grzegorz Zych.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gregory Zych, and I'm an assistant at the Department of Energy Transition here at our University of Economics in Katowice. I'm also honored to be a member of organizing committee of our wonderful conference. And so first, before I start my presentation, I would like to thank all of you for coming here. Some of you third time in a row, some of you for the first time, some of you through internet, but your appearance here is absolutely amazing to see that so many times we can meet and talk about such important matters. It's really, really heartwarming. So thank you very much. I'd also want to thank all the other people organizing this wonderful conference, Professor Czarnecka, Dr. Marcin Kraśniewski, but first and foremost, our beloved students. Well, we are just working here, but they're actually spending their free time to help us, which is the greatest sacrifice. So thank you guys so very much for all your hard work. You made it possible. But due to my talkativeness and a constant issue with time, I better start up my presentation. So today I would like to talk with you about the trust and transparency in green economy and how Poland addresses in this scenario the challenge of greenwashing. And so my presentation I will try to finish it, of course, will consist of few different models. But okay. So, first of all, I would like to focus on the definition of the greenwashing. Oh, unfortunately, this doesn't work, so I will switch with you. I'm so sorry. Okay, much better. So, first of all, I would like to talk a little bit about the definition of greenwashing. I believe that everyone here knows a little bit about it, knows even more about it. But unfortunately, as it constantly turns out, greenwashing is extremely complicated. And unfortunately, the people who are practicing it are extremely creative. And so the definition and the practices change constantly. So I believe it's quite important to talk about the definitions. Later on, I would like to show a part of international perspective on greenwashing. I would like to talk a little bit about the cases, the newest cases, of course, and a little bit about the international legislation concerning greenwashing, and of course, the perspective of other countries and how they try to fight it. And lastly, I would like to talk about our Polish perspective, especially due to the fact that in the last few months, actually some quite important cases opened. Some very big companies in Poland were accused of greenwashing practices. We are all looking forward to see how exactly it will end up, but I believe it will liven up a little bit the discussion about the greenwashing, not only the scientific discussion, but first and foremost the legal and practical discussion. And at the end, I would like to show you some of my conclusions concerning this topic, if I will have enough time for that. So let us start with the definitions. I picked up some definitions, of course, mind that those are just 4 examples. As I already stated, unfortunately, greenwashing is constantly changing. And so the definitions are also very different. Some of them, they address the behavior or an activity, like this definition created for the purposes of Cambridge Dictionary and Thesaurus. Some of the definitions, they are trying to address more some environmental practices or communication issues. But first and foremost, and please look at the first part of this definition, they address the consumers themselves. And so on. It changes, so on. It evolves all the time. Those are just some examples. But I think that the one thing which is showing exactly why we have so many definitions is the many faces or many sins of greenwashing. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about them. So one of the environmental organizations, the TerraChoice Environmental Marketing, they created lists of sins. The sins which are usually just the types of greenwashing created or used around the world, such as the sin of no proof, which are claims that have no scientific or technical proof behind them, that they're just stating that something might be eco-friendly or environmentally friendly without any proper support. We have a sin of hidden trade-off, which usually is suggesting that the product complies with some environmental protection principles, while highlighting only just a little part of it and completely disregarding the rest of the product, the rest of the service. The sin of vagueness, probably one of the most popular ones, in which there are several eco-friendly claims which are so vague that no one really understands what they state, but they might unfortunately affect consumers, and not only them. There are several more sins, but as you can see, since we have so many forms of greenwashing, so many forms of greenwashing activities, the definitions, they have to evolve as well. But unfortunately, the one quite sad, I would say, issue is that even though we have so many definitions, dictionary ones, scholar ones, even there are definitions created just for the media purposes, we don't have one single definition of a legal caliber, so to speak. And actually, it's something what Professor Heffron said at the beginning of our conference, that we are letting people who are not lawyers defining a extremely important matter. And unfortunately, the legal brains, they are trying. I'm not saying they're not, but I would say that, especially from the Polish perspective, so far at least, there is much work to be done by us lawyers. Now, going back to the coming forward to our international perspective. So first, it's I think at every presentation, every discussion about greenwashing, the best part of those presentations are some examples. So let me just start with them. So one of the most fresh ones I could find lately was the case of Keurig and Lavazza in Canada, in which the Keurig unfortunately misled the public by stating that their single-use coffee pods can be extremely easy to recycle, that there almost 90% of those little plastic cups can be recycled. Turns out, unfortunately, that for whole Canada, which is a rather big country, there were only 3 provinces that actually could recycle those cups. And it wasn't so easy as well, because there was a whole procedure that a possible consumer had to first attend to in order to recycle something. And so the Canadian legislator, or the Canadian Regulatory Office of Competition and Consumers, fined Keurig by, I believe it was about 3 million penalty for such practice. The other example is Shein in 2025. I believe that everyone knows Shein, and it's actually quite interesting that they are even trying to claim that something is environmental. But Shein represented one of the scene of vagueness by creating a lot of hashtags, creating ad campaigns which were trying to prove that Shein was actually eco-friendly. eco-friendly or green. Unfortunately for Shein, the Italian Office of Consumer Protection and Competition found out that those claims, of course, were completely false, and so also showed that the Shein is not properly enforcing legislation which is aiming to reduce carbon footprint. And the last example, which is, I believe, closest to my heart because it comes from the energy sector, is Shell in 2023. Shell, what they did in England is that they claimed that they have a massive green overhaul, that they are trying to focus on renewable energy. And so they launched a massive campaign on YouTube, billboards, TV ads, on which they stated that they are in southwest of UK delivering energy, which is 100% renewable from renewable sources to 78,000 homes. But they forgot to add, or they added it, this information, but in a very, very small font, that this actually was this energy was actually coming not from Shell, but from the energy companies in England, from the energy grid, not from Shell itself. And so after several organizations filed, well, unfortunately not a lawsuit, but they filed a complaint to a regulatory office of the UK. Shell was not fined, but the ad campaign was completely banned. And so what are the regulations, or actually the types of regulations that are used internationally? Because we don't have time, unfortunately, to talk about all the different types of regulations that legislators use to fight greenwashing. So I believe I would like to show you two specific types. So first, let's start with Competition Act in Canada. This example is quite interesting because the Competition Act, as you can probably hear, it's quite a general legal act. It addresses not only greenwashing, but the Canadian legislator thought that the greenwashing issue and the misleading in terms of environmental issues, misleading consumers, but not only consumers, is such a serious threat that they added a specific principles and articles to this Competition Act, which are addressing greenwashing directly. So we have principles stating, for example, that the environmental claims should be truthful, not false or misleading, or that the comparative environmental claims should be specific about what is being compared. So the greenwashing, of course, the types of greenwashing are perfectly and directly addressed. In the EU, the European legislator found out through their own resources that the consumers in the EU not only value the environmental claims, but they are actually willing to spend more money if something can be eco-friendly, and so on. The greenwashing, of course, became a serious issue in the EU. So our legislator, our European legislator, created a document called Greenwashing Directive. Of course, the regular name is a little bit longer because it's just a directive of European Parliament and Council, amending several directives as regards to empowering consumers for the green transition through better protection against their practices and better information. It's a bit of a mouthful. I think that the Greenwashing Directive is a little bit better. And so the Greenwashing Directive is also doing a quite similar thing to a Competition Act in Canada, which is legally directly addressing issues of greenwashing. Now, of course, the countries of the EU, they have a right to choose on how they will implement the Greenwashing Directive. Unfortunately, Poland is a little bit, well, we are not technically behind, but we still do not have any legislation which would address this directive. So it's up to our legislator to choose whether we will go into the Competition Act Canada way, which is implementing greenwashing issues to our existing legal frames, or to create a completely different legal act which will do it, which will address it more precisely. Now, how is it in the Polish perspective? So we do have regulations. We do have tools in order to fight with greenwashing. We have an act on counterfeiting, unfair market practices, on combating unfair competition, and of course, the act on competition and consumer protection. There are several issues though. First of all, those acts, they are not addressing greenwashing. They are addressing unfair market practices, but unfortunately, the regulator or a trader or just a natural person, they have to prove first that certain greenwashing activity is a unfair market practice by the definition of this legal act, which makes it a little bit more hard in order to prove that some companies actually practicing greenwashing. The second thing, which is a little problem, is that the first two acts you see, so unfair competition and unfair market practices, in those bills, the weight of actually filing a lawsuit will always be on the consumer or on the company which was treated with the greenwashing practice, which means that unfortunately to find justice in these greenwashing practices, some person will have to sacrifice a lot of money, a lot of time with not such a sure result. The exemption from this is the Act on Competition and Consumer Protection. This act grants our regulatory office a power to create or to investigate a matter only when consumers will file a specific motion for that. But the problem is that in order for our regulatory office to work like that, something which have to happen is that a specific practice is actually infringing a general rights of consumers, which will not indicate which will not address the individual issues, but the general interests. And so it can be a little bit problematic. And that's exactly what happened in the 4 cases that actually happened in Poland last few months. So the regulatory office launched a proceedings around the DHL, DPD, Allegro, and InPost. 3 of them are logistic companies. One of them is kind of like a Polish Amazon, I would say. All those companies, they tried to create certain claims which, for example, said that their car fleet is completely net zero, that they have no emissions whatsoever, or they tried to manipulate a little bit the consumers, showing them that using those services will make a better situation on our Earth throughout the environmental claims. Now, what happened, of course, is that our regulatory office found those words a little bit misleading, and in the end infringing the collective interests of consumers. And that's why we have those proceedings. But that's the issue, that if you personally or your company as itself will be the victim of greenwashing, then unfortunately the whole weight of the proceedings will be on your shoulders. Now, what are the conclusions here? Well, first of all, we need a direct legal reference to the practice of greenwashing. Currently, we have some general practices that might be greenwashing, but it's up to us to prove that they are a greenwashing. However, in the European Union or Canada, those practices are defined, which makes it a little bit easier to find some justice. The other thing is the harmonization of protection. Currently, we have a difference in protection when you are a consumer, when you are a natural person, for example, who runs their own business, or when you are a company. Unfortunately, not everyone is protected the same way, but the differences currently are a little bit too big. So I would say it's absolutely necessary to harmonize the mechanisms of protection. And the third conclusion, unfortunately, this is the same thing. Sorry for that. The third conclusion is, of course, that we have to address those changes as fast as we can. So actions like those created by the UOKIK, our regulatory office, may happen a little bit faster, and the greenwashing might be eradicated in the future. Thank you so very much, and thank you for additional.
Thank you very much. Thank you for a very interesting presentation, excellent slides. We have one more speaker today, Dr. Anna Górczyńska from the University of Łódź. Please come to us, and one more presentation instead of discussion.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like just to show you the short overview of just the selected aspects of public procurement system, because efficiency in public procurement could be an implementation measure of the just transition. So let me spend some time on those aspects, because as we know that concept of just transition refers to the moving forward to a climate neutral, resource efficient economy in the way that is socially fair and inclusive. But public procurement system spends about 19% of GDP of the European Union member states. And it's regulated on the three levels. On the level of regulation of government procurement agreement, so it is plurilateral agreement of WTO. So it is international level. Secondly, we have got the European regulations and directives which refer to the public spendings. And on the third level, we have got national regulations on the law on public procurement adopted on the level of all member states. And that picture we can more or less observe all over the world, because there should be always in all democratic countries the rules which refer to the just acquisition of works, of supplies, and of services, which are financed by the public money. So what could we think about the concept of efficiency in public procurement, and how can we just build a bridge between just transition and public procurement? In legal literature and as a result of the legal regulations on the level of national legal acts and European regulations, efficiency is understood as obtaining goods, services, and works on the best possible combination of cost, of quality, and time. And as just transition agenda emphasizes not only decarbonization and resource efficiency, but also social inclusion, decent work, regional cohesion, and promotion and integration of varied local actors, we can think that public spendings could contribute in the promotion of for example, local suppliers, of small and medium-sized enterprises, also quality jobs, and production and services connected with just the climate goals. So efficient public procurement from the perspective of the just transition can support resource allocation. It can be conducted by planning, by savings, by coordination of tasks. We are all observers of the public works, which when they are not coordinated, when they are not planned, they require a lot of capital, they require a lot of human resources, and they can be also just a big problem for the environment. Secondly, market transformation and life cycle costing consideration, so the economic approach, which should be transported into just the way of thinking of the public spending. Of course, some contracting authorities already did it in the past, taking under consideration, for example, the cost of energy in planning, in design, in just the running costs of the buildings, which are of the public use, but the other partners did not consider that. And the problem is that life cycle costing is just a recommendation. It is not obligatory, but step by step, we can see that there are some researches, there are some projects, there are some tools which encourage public administration to introduce it in their day-to-day life, at least on that very easy just level, not with just very complicated system. But of course, artificial intelligence can also help us in just predicting of right risks and also taking under consideration of just the whole life cycle costing of the product. The next aspect is access of small, medium-sized enterprises and local actors to the market of public tenders, and also reducing the risk of just lock-in by shifting from so popular lowest price criteria to the most economically advantageous offer, which refer to the other aspects that only price criteria, namely delivery, maybe also just the aspects connected with social aspects and also just environmental aspects. So that strategic award criteria, even lowest price still dominates because, frankly speaking, it's 60% of the tenders officially, and unofficially when, for example, the guarantee or delivery date is additional criteria, the price is still the main aspect of the selection criteria. So just the form of encouraging of the just transition would be probably designing ready-to-go tools which could help contracting authority to introduce those other than only price criteria into their award criteria procedure, just to assure the efficiency of the public standings. Also, from just the green public procurement approach, we talk about circularity and sustainability, which allows implementation of the circular economy principles and those which are very, very important and very well known for the just transition. Challenges and barriers. So those most important were already mentioned. So it is that approach based on the lowest price. Secondly, administrative burdens, because still public procurement procedure is understood as time-consuming, as complicated, as just the procedure which is needed, but on the other hand, which is very often the subject of manipulation. And we already just can mention many, many examples in all member states. Also, the jurisdiction of the Court of Justice shows that even we try to amend the national legal systems, we try just to think about amending the already existing directives from 2014, we still have got the problems, the same problems with the administrative burden, with the description of the subject of the contract, with the qualification criteria of the providers, and with the award criteria. So just maybe sometimes just some ready-to-go tools and some masters could somehow try to help with that, at that just approach, just transition, just approach of just way of thinking of contracting authority could also just increase also the efficiency of public spendings. The problem which we also consider, it is limited competition and small and medium sizes enterprises participation, which can be solved by dividing contracts into the lots, for example, or just promoting digitalization. Even we have got a single European procurement agreement, which also gives the companies possibility just to the easier access to the data, and also just one document which shows the fulfillment of the qualification criteria. It is still difficult to be fulfilled and also requires also just consensus and collaboration between, for example, network of the suppliers or subcontractors. Last but not least, because my time is limited, and thank you for considering my application for the conference as summing up that panel, I would like just to stress the role of monitoring evaluation, because it is also a very important lesson learned from the former public procurement procedure. And it's just a need not to finish only on the procedure of public procurement, but on the implementation of just the, as we treat it in Poland, civil law agreement between public administration and selected winner. So in most cases, the private entrepreneur who is conducting the works or supplying the goods or services in the framework of the public procurement agreement. But it's very important to monitor it and to evaluate it, and to just learn from good and bad examples. The best is to learn just not from the own mistakes. So just to finish, I would like just to thank you for organization of such an interesting conference and possibility of just being with you and sharing the experience and listening to so interesting just presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to make a discussion, so I will close this session, invite you to the break. Thank you very much.